Buongiorno and welcome to another exciting edition of Meet Your Neighbor. My name is Ron Falconi, and I had this idea back in the fall of 2006 where I wanted to interview local politicians, local business people, and all of your neighbors so that all of you can get to know them a little bit better. This is the 89th episode of the show, and I am honored today to have Medina County Commissioner Steve Hambley to come down and visit us. Steve, welcome to the studios.
Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it.
How are you doing this morning?
Very good, very good.
Steve, can you tell us something about yourself that not too many people know about you?
Gee, the first thing I think of is I'm not very good at foreign languages. Most people don't realize that. Actually, when I was going through my graduate school, my PhD, you're required to have 2 foreign languages.
Oh.
And I struggled with German. I was like, it was awful. And then fortunately, I had an option that I could do math and I could actually computer science and statistics.
As a language?
As a language option, which was great. I'm actually a quantitative historian. So it ended up enabled me to go into urban studies and political science and all that. My PhD is in history. So it kind of made a much more diverse background. But if it had really been a second language, I'm not sure I would have got that PhD. So most people don't realize I really struggled with German. I mean, it was just awful. It's just, I don't know why I did that, but it's I'm just not really great. I have one language, English, and I'll make understand a word, but once you start going to sentences, I'm just kind of, okay, I just can't quite get it or understand it. So that's, I guess, most people don't realize that. So.
Oh, gosh. Steve, can you, it's been a while since I've had a Medina County Commissioner here on the set. I did have a candidate recently, but can you refresh our memories? Can you tell us what exactly does a county commissioner do?
Okay, well, we're the taxing authority for the county. In other words, we're obligated through other various boards that are county boards to put their issues on the ballot. We basically, somebody that's elected needs to do it. And even though their members are appointed, such as the library board, the health district, MRDD, all those we're the taxing authority for them. The only one county entity we're not the taxing authority for, and it's unusual, but is the park district. They basically have their own authority to put their own issues on the ballot.
Oh, so you don't go through the commissioners for that?
Nope, not for the county commissioners. So that's kind of an interesting, I guess, thing about county government. So we're the taxing authority. We're also the financial authority, budgeting authority for all the other. There's basically 11 executive officials of a county government. You've got the clerk of courts, you've got the treasurer, the recorder, the sheriff, the prosecutor, the highway engineer, the coroner. You got 3 commissioners. Well, we all have certain executive authority, but we're the financial authority for that. We're a board of commissioners.
Overall.
Yeah. As they say, there's a saying that one commissioner doesn't have the authority to turn on a light bulb, but 2 can light the world because it takes 2 to do it. One doesn't have that authority. So when you look at it, we're that legislative body also. We have the authority to do a number of things, but only as specified under the Ohio Revised Code. Much of the townships we have a close relationship to because we're basically the road authority. When they want to vacate a road or build a road, dedicate it, they have to go through the commissioners. We have statutory authority when it comes to stormwater quality, floodplains, those kind of things.
Overall throughout the county or just
throughout the
townships?
county, just within the townships. Municipalities, they have a charter. So yeah, your councils are in charge of that as well as in the villages, their municipalities are in charge of that. So the county has that responsibility. Likewise, we are the road authority with the county highway engineer. So we're the legislative body for a lot of other functions, solid waste and so forth. So there's a lot of duties. One county commissioner from Lake County, Dan Troy is his name, and he's been around for a long time, used to be a state rep. He basically is called county government, county commissioners, particularly, we're the branch office of the state. But so basically, if the state needs a program done, it typically is done at the county level, and the county commissioners are responsible for it.
Okay. You seem very knowledgeable about this. How long have you been a county commissioner?
For 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah. Prior to that, I was a councilman in the city of Brunswick for 5 years.
Oh, okay. Steve, can you tell us your position on economic development and taxes?
Well, I guess I kind of go back, being a historian, I go back to the foundation. Economic development is pretty interesting. It's got a little bit more complicated. Obviously, when I was through grad school, I did urban economics and so forth through urban studies. So I understand a little bit more of the complexities of economic development. But fundamentally, it goes back, it's really about economic development, and the role of government is really kind of interesting. When we look at our founding communities, they understood that they had institutions that are key to their development. Number one, obviously, is families are part of that, and that's important to economic development, believe it or not. You need good, and then the institutions beyond that ends up being the churches, your religious community, and also your education, what's called back then the common school. So I look at the fundamentals of economic development. I recognize that education is part of your community. It really is part of your economic development future. Anything beyond that builds upon that. Even your retail business requires a good workforce with a good family and people that are moral, and that have a good sense of what's right and wrong, and so forth. And likewise, that the kids are well educated. So that's kind of like the basics of that. Any businesses that move into your community, economic development is really important. Obviously, to them, those basic fundamentals. So they got good families, a good workforce. Good education system, good schools, as well as good church people that are, like I said, that regularly have some morality and some sense of right and wrong. Those are all important to economic development. So, and then when I look down, even go back further to the fundamental understanding about taxes, it's under local control. It really is up to the people. There was kind of a transition I made when I went from as a councilman to a commissioner. Being that we were the taxing authority, there's so many entities. When you're on council, you kind of feel like, well, this is our tax. This is what we're responsible for, and we have to, yay or nay, and we have to, if we don't believe in it, well, then we just don't vote for it and put it on the ballot. But likely, when you start going countywide, there's so many taxes are coming before you that are actually other entities, other decision makers. Okay. And our job is to review it, make sure that it's in accordance with the law. But ultimately, in both circumstances, really it's up to the people. It is their money, and so therefore it's their authority. And so fundamentally, I believe that when it comes down to taxes, that it's up to the people. And it's our job as elected officials to give them the best information we have possible, to say this is what we need to do, and at least in our opinion, it's like, okay, given the circumstances, this is what we can do. If you want to accomplish a given public need, okay, here's what the tax level would have to be. And if they say no, well, then you just don't do it. You just have to live within your budget.
Okay. And I know you touched on this, but can you maybe go into some more detail about how a county commissioner affects the everyday lives of people?
Well, as I put out, I was being the taxing authority for a lot of these entities that would kind of affect them that way, because those taxes don't go to Columbus, they don't go to Washington.
They go here. They go here in Medina County.
They stay here in Medina County, provide local services, and so that's a really important, I think, to understand is those levels of service are kind of important, because in many of those boards, the county commissioners have appointing authority, at least partial appointing authority. We appoint half the board members for MRDD, the other part the judicial appoint. Same thing with the library. We end up appointing half of those. The judiciary appoints those. So for us, we have some influence in making sure that the services, that there's groups and institutions, organizations that provide the services. Now, if you're out in the township, we have a much closer relationship, because we're working with the township trustees. We're working with them in terms of providing services to them, road services through the highway engineer's office. Obviously, if there's any development going on, stormwater runoff, if there's flooding, well, they'll call the county commissioners, because it's our regulations and kind of our authority that is part of that, particularly within the townships. So it really depends on, I guess, what jurisdiction you're in. In the city, we maybe have less direct impact other than through the library and MRDD and the health department.
Okay. What do you think is the biggest issue facing Medina County today?
Wow. Well, obviously
there's probably a number of them.
The economy. I mean, you look number one, the economy. It's showing some signs now. There used to be former city manager Skip Trimble, who I worked with when I was a councilman, kind of told me, kind of trained me into what was going on in terms of the public sector, understanding a little bit more about Medina County and Brunswick in particular. And so that Brunswick and Medina County typically were the last in a recession and usually the first one out. There's some signs of that, because we've been, within the bottom three of the lowest in terms of unemployment. We're actually, it's even going down even more. Half our people, half our workforce work outside this county and adjoining counties. And as the economy kind of starts to get picked up, it tends to be those occupations that do actually do pretty well during recession. They end up being the white collar, the workforce. Some are blue collar, but by and large, if they're in those industries that are actually still making some money and doing pretty well. So you have a lot of people. Yes, we have some poor in Medina County, but compared to everywhere else around us, we're doing pretty good. So the biggest, I guess, when we look at the biggest issue we're facing is that with this lackluster economy, we've had a lot of growth, as you know. We've gone from 50-some thousand people over the last 2 decades of moving into this county and being here, born or moved here. And that has created some impact on our infrastructure. Communities, obviously, I live in Brunswick and aware of the road situation, just try to avoid those roads in particular, just to make sure it don't damage the car, but we know but that's happening elsewhere. Some do a little bit better, have been able to do a little bit better job than others, have been more fortunate to be able to address those issues, but infrastructure still is a pretty big issue in this county because of all the growth and demand here. We still have had residential development here, new homes being built, but that places demands on infrastructure of roads, infrastructure in terms of water and sewer and so forth. So with the kind of a lackluster economy and not many revenues, we're finding the cost of that growth coming to haunt us. Okay. We've seen some increases in justice and the cost of the jails and so forth. So really, I look at it as the big issue we're facing is basically the lackluster economy. It has not grown as well as we'd like, and the revenues haven't kept up with some of the costs. The costs are catching up to us from all the growth.
What do you think we can do to try to address some of those things? Is there something that we can do?
Well, continue to grow. I mean, we've done everything we could in the county. I believe we've demonstrated in terms of economic development. There's the collaborative effort we've had with the fiber optic network.
Yes.
Obviously, the Brunswick and Brunswick, as well as the city council in Medina and Wadsworth and the villages of Westfield and Seville, all came in to help assist the county in helping to finance this thing. But largely, we realized it was a collaboration. We were part of it. But in large part, you had the Port Authority, but you had also the businesses. A little bit more than half of it's going to be public sector use, but the other half, the other portion of it, ends up being the private sector. And that's an immense value, particularly as we try to recruit businesses into our county and help enhance the growth, but also the current incumbent businesses that are looking forward to having that, not only in terms of the bandwidth that's available, but also one of the things that wasn't available is that redundancy. We have the ability, particularly such as Westfield companies. Their problem was if they lost, in being a financial institution as they are, they lost that data connection. I mean, they're out of business, and they needed to have redundancy. Here, that loop provides redundancy that, frankly, is at a lower cost than if you would have had an incumbent provider provide it, because they're monopolies. They look at the return on investment in different terms. They look at it at a scale, at a national scale, and they'll make their investment on that basis. Our county, by making this investment here, you couldn't recruit, you couldn't encourage them. When you looked at the amount of money that would have to be invested here in Medina County compared to where they could invest it elsewhere in Cleveland and Washington or someplace else, they wouldn't get a better return on investment. So they're not going to invest as much. With our own investment, we've actually been able to expand that base much more so. Puts us much more competitive in terms of having not only that bandwidth and that speed and the price, but also the redundancy, as I said.
Sure.
That's a major move. But what it comes down to is growing our businesses, being business friendly, working with them, and I think we certainly have history in our county, the county commissioners, working with the communities that want to work with their businesses. And government does have a role when it comes to encouraging, making sure that the infrastructure is in place, make sure the policies are in place, that we're impeding businesses where we inappropriately, and that they were basically providing I'll just say the ability for that business to thrive, letting private sector thrive where they really do, that's their job. That's what they do best. Government doesn't do very well when it comes to generating profits. Our job is to keep the costs low. We do, if ain't profits, we get the theoretical profits, more than anything, do get reinvested. And we have enterprise funds. Basically, it is to keep the cost of the service low. But here, our motive is actually providing a low-cost service and a base level of service. Businesses is really for meeting market needs, and they're obviously more adept at that, and government kind of staying out of the way is one way of being able to do that.
Yeah. Steve, can you tell me like 3 things that you're most proud of as county commissioner?
Well, I guess I'd probably have to say my involvement with the sales tax for schools.
Okay.
That was not my idea. That was one we were recruited by the school boards brought forward. I was following it with Sue Muniak, who just recently retired from the school board. Great woman, and she kept me in contact with other school boards, and they were working on their proposal, and I kept up with it. And when they brought it to the Board of Commissioners, I kind of jumped in and said, sure, this made sense. This kind of meets with the idea of what a commissioner does. Yeah, they have an idea. Can we bring it to the voters and let the voters decide? Indeed, I worked with them on that. I'm one of those commissioners that jump in on ideas that I think that work. I've helped with the county home issue, with McDack, the drug abuse levy issues. I'll work with the library, and also politically, I end up working obviously for the sales tax for schools. Ended up to the point where unfortunately, I'll just say there wasn't a lot of belief, at least countywide, that this could be done. So myself, and fortunately Mike Kovac, who is our county auditor, we were able to develop a bipartisan approach to this,
yes.
And it was great to work with, and recognizing this is something really important, so we co-chaired that. I served as the treasurer for the PAC group that raised the money, and the one thing I found, the 2 things I found: one, schools are really adept at campaigning, because they do it often, so it really doesn't take that much if they really have their heart and soul, and they were really into this, and it's like, okay, here's how we can do a countywide campaign, because they're not used to countywide. The second thing I found is after the election is that we really hadn't done a lot of investment. We had underinvested in terms of education. The problem is when you can imagine from a school board and you're being an elected official, it's like there's then always the decision is how much you're going to go for to the public. They're only going to support so much. They can only afford so much. So you're only going to go like, okay, especially with a property tax, which is probably the most unfair type of tax there is, but it's a form of tax where most of us are just kind of stuck with. And so you kind of go back and say, all right, there's a tax here, and that basically it's going to apply across the board, and you're going to kind of work. So you're going to balance out how much you're going to tax. And people say, well, if we're going to go for a bond issue, well, we're going to have to less how much operating. Well, if we're going to need so much for operating, we're going to ask for less in the bond issue, right, or ask for the issues for capital. And so what it means is over a period of time, school boards tend to underinvest in the capital part that they needed, especially with technology and the costs and so forth. So what the sales tax did is brought it up because it can only be used for capital. It can't be used for operating.
Yeah,
it can't be used for salaries.
I want to ask you that because there's some misconceptions about that. But
yeah,
the sales tax is meant specifically for capital improvements.
Capital improvement, that's right. Under the Ohio Revised Code, and we were the first and only county to do this, and we essentially broke ground to do it. But its capital improvement has to be formed countywide, and it distributes it out to the schools on the basis of population. That's up to local rules. But it can only use for capital improvements that are used within the district. In other words, it can't be used for capital; it can be used elsewhere by the district. Right. So they can only use it within, and under state law, the definition of a capital is anything that has a 5-year life or longer. So therefore, textbooks and some software and computers and buildings and so forth. I think what it did is it really made a difference in the schools and the quality of education, what I've seen elsewhere, and then investments that are going on all over the county that wouldn't have been done. That really has increased the level of our education. I mean, we were not only, and the campaign was called, it was Keep Our Schools Excellent, actually COSI was our PAC group. And the whole idea was we were excellent at the time, and indeed we've continued to be excellent. And that's not due to the tax. That's due also to the families, the quality of education. Like I said, those are part of the foundations of good communities. I mean, Cleveland can do what they want in terms of economic development. They can build casinos. They can build Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They can do all that without the problem with families and the problem with our education system. And without fixing that, that's really going to continue to be a poor community. And so in our county, fortunately, we are. And that's probably one of the things I'm proudest of. The other is I would say economic development that had an impact would be infrastructure, the roadways, I-71 widening,
Yes.
Route 18 interchange, the tens of millions of dollars that I've been able to work with regional officials and state officials and federal to get money into the county for various road projects. That's been, like I said, phenomenal, the amount of investment we've had, because been fortunate since I've been involved as a commissioner, be in the right place at the right time, working with the right groups, and being able to work along it. Right now, obviously, there's funding issues statewide.
Sure.
There's some challenges, but Skip Trimble used to say, you follow the money. And so that's essentially what I did when I became commissioner, is I followed where the money was. They changed the system of how states funded roads. They called it a track system. George Voinovich, the governor, had changed how they funded it. Rather than fund everything, they said, we're going to set priorities. So I was on one of the first committees for the region saying, would you sit on a committee that would look at the track funding? I go, sure. I volunteered, and everybody's going like, why do you want to be involved? I go, because I'm following the money. I did. I followed the money and go, okay, well, let's see if we can get money for Route 18 and for the improvements that we need elsewhere. And so we've been successful, pretty much throughout this, to tap into those federal funds and those state funds for roadway improvements. Third, I guess, is the fiber optic, or explain that collaborative effort. That's the one that more recently, where really was just, it really was important, was working and getting the buy-in of the communities. And, and I've said before, there's no single elected official can claim that they themselves did everything. Frankly, everything we do is based upon working with others. And being even a county commissioner, I've got to work with a county prosecutor, a county engineer, all these other,
everyone.
As I said, all these
collaborative
other officials.
effort.
And that's not even including the judicial. You've got 4 judicial, 11 executive in the county government. Geez, I mean, you're going to have a lot of people you have to work with. Same thing regionally and even locally, local governments. It's just not the city of, the mayor of the city. It's also the council members of the city that you need to work with. So any success that I can point to, I can say it came from working with these individuals, not really attributable just to myself.
Steve, you touched on this before, but can you explain your educational background a little bit more in depth?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, I worked my way through college. I can say when I went to my 20th year reunion, I was the only one that had never left school, even after I graduated, because I ended up working doing a couple years. I left before my bachelor's degree was finished, and finished up my bachelor's part-time.
Where did you go for college?
Kent State University.
Kent State.
And I was in a number of fields for a while. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was going on those life journeys, I guess. I was in music for a while, and decided, well, I didn't want to do that. I was in the band, symphony orchestra, and so forth early on. I was like, nah,
Did you play a musical instrument?
Yeah, I played a euphonium, actually, which was baritone horn. I was Brunswick High School. I was a John Philip Sousa band winner.
Wow, I didn't know that.
In 1972. Al Sago was my conductor. He was a great guy. I mean, he just was a super guy. But so I went to Kent State University, and because I had some friends that went there, and I ended up going through a lot of different fields. Ended up majoring in engineering for about 2 years, and went through all the differential equations and calculus and analytic geometry and everything like that. And like in engineering physics, like, nah, I really don't want to do that. I like the social sciences. So I ended up doing that, and then got my master's degree in history and my PhD in history. But that transition, I worked in the private sector for about 8 years, and then worked part-time. I had a consulting business for a while I was working my way through grad school, and obviously the grad assistant. I was a Martin Scholar at the University of Akron for 2 years during my PhD program. And just from that, then started working at the Center for Urban Studies, University of Akron, and then the Public Services Institute at the Lorain County Community College before I was elected commissioner in 1996.
Are you married?
Yes, I am.
And you live here in Brunswick?
Yes. I've been blessed by my late wife, Susan, was, as you know, as a councilwoman. We were married for 31 years. She had muscular dystrophy, and I, as Father Krisner, I've talked about this, when she passed away in 2008, I can just say I was fortunate. I've been twice blessed. My wife, Cheryl, we married last year. and married a year. And
congratulations.
And it's been, like I said, twice blessed and really fortunate. I have a stepson who's in the Marines, and right now Camp Lejeune, going to be going to Afghanistan sometime middle of this year.
Okay.
He's I guess a grunt. I guess he's in security and so forth. They're going to be guarding tanks. So he's a good kid. He's very used to be an Eagle Scout and so forth.
Oh, wow.
Comes from a good family. And
No, I know I have some pictures that I have. Ben, do you think we can run some of those?
To my wife Cheryl.
Okay.
This was the Commissioner's Charity Ball. We
Ball.
have it on an annual basis.
Okay.
Started in 2000, and the money going to various charities. Oaks Family Care Center is one of the recipients, as well as Habitat for Humanity this year. My brother and my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law works as well as my stepson, who's the Marine, and his wife now.
Oh, okay.
Erica. And then my sister-in-law works at the Career Center on cosmetology, and my brother works at NASA. And of course, you and I we volunteered United Way at the pancake, with their kind of kickoff.
Clipping, yes.
Yeah, I've been on the United Way board. That was a number of years. I was president in 2005, and was still volunteer. And then it was Gary Werner and I, obviously. Had the honor and privilege of swearing him in as mayor
of Brunswick.
Yeah, he's doing an awesome job.
Hey, Steve, for every guest on the show, I like to play a game of fill in the blank.
Okay, all right.
Well, the one place I want to travel to but haven't is blank.
The one place I want to travel to and haven't, the Holy Lands.
Holy Land?
Yeah, exactly.
Why?
You know, well, I'll just say, you know, I was an altar boy and, you know, going grade school at St. Ambrose, 8 years and so forth. And obviously read the Bible and so forth, still involved. It's like, you hear about these places, but you'd like to go see them. You know, it's like, okay, I have to have the basic understanding of the geography. So I really would love to see, you know, Bethlehem and Jerusalem.
Wow.
And it's
like,
okay,
that would be,
I know, it's just like, okay, someday maybe, and I have to get obviously a passport to do it, but and maybe be all clear that it's fine. But I think that would be a tremendous place. I understand it's safer than walking than some downtown sections like in some of our big cities. So, but I think that would be really awesome to go to.
Okay. Yeah. What about when I retire, I blank?
Oh. Well, I've said this. It's like, okay, eventually when I retire, I will get back to playing music again. The one thing I kind of miss is when baritone horn, I was in the symphony orchestra, and obviously been around a lot of music for over the years with my late wife Susan, and she was really into the arts and now the music conservatory, and we got a lot of concerts and stuff. So it's like, you know, I want to get back into the community band. So I think when I retire, I want to get back into the community band and kind of I'll have to pick up my instrument. I only pick it up every now and then. I still have it and still remember. But when I sing, I still sing a little bit. And when I read I still read the music, and I still do. Some people notice when I go like this, I'm doing the fingerings when I'm playing the music, so I don't forget how to do that. So I'm always trying to keep that, and eventually when I retire, I'll be going back to playing music just for fun.
Steve, can you give any neighborly advice to people who are watching right now in Brunswick, Brunswick Hills, Wadsworth Township, or people watching on the internet?
Wow. I would say value your community. I mean, the one thing is you get out of a community what you put into it. And that's the one thing my parents kind of taught me. We were I grew up in Brunswick Hills, over in Substation Road and that. And they were very active in the community. Not only, I'll just say in terms of volunteering, we volunteered for the Red Cross, and we did a lot of other things, but they are also involved politically. In other words, their community affairs. They were part of the Brunswick Hills Township Association that ended up working, I guess, fighting the commissioners on the sewers, actually, because it was a huge cost to them. So I was very closely, I guess, in tune growing up that there is a cost to this infrastructure. And these assessments that were coming through were just outrageous. And so they ended up, they were part of that to affect change. They were actually able to get through Bill Batchelder, who was in the legislature at the time, be able to get some changes that actually allowed, in particularly agricultural property, to defer that assessment, which hadn't been in place before. And rather than forcing farms and this big acreage to go out, I mean, basically people lose their homes or lose their farms, lose their large lots because they had to pay for this huge assessment, and they allowed them to defer it. And so it kind of taught me the lesson, and I think that's what I'd share is you need to stay involved politically. You know, you're in charge. It is your community, and it's kind of like your social obligation, civic obligation to be involved. Not only give a little bit to the community in terms of nonprofits, but also in terms of involvement in government.
Absolutely. Steve Hambley, Medina County Commissioner, thank you for coming down to the studio today and chatting with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
My name is Ron Falconi. I'm the host of Meet Your Neighbor, and I wanted to thank Medina County Commissioner Steve Hambley for coming down to the studios today and chatting with us. I doubt there's anything more profound to be said. My name is Ron Falconi. I'm signing off. Arrivederci.